This coming Saturday, September 27th, we celebrate the feast of St. Vincent de Paul. That's him over there, that big statue. So let me just tell you a little bit about the life and the mission of St. Vincent de Paul. Vincent de Paul was born in 1581 in a small town in southern France. His family was of simple means, farmers living off their land. His parents raised 6 children. Vincent was their second son, very intelligent, and was fortunate to be able to go to school. Vincent quickly developed a dream of making something of him and one day being able to provide for his family in return for the many sacrifices that they made for him to get his education. Vincent chose to pursue the priesthood. He had great determination, and by the age of 19, he managed to get himself ordained a priest. Now, this is noteworthy because at that time, church law said no one could be ordained before the age of 25. He tricked a bishop. So this young man, Vincent, in his heart of hearts, felt ready to take on the world. However, he would soon find that it wouldn't be quite as easy as he thought. The next few years of Vincent's life right after ordination are something of a mystery. Having gone off to claim a small inheritance, he disappeared for several years. There's different stories that are told about Vincent and what happened, that he was captured by pirates, he was sold as a slave, he studied under an alchemist. All these make their way into the life story of this beloved saint. But some say that this may have been Vincent's first real experience of poverty, a spiritual poverty like he's never known. When Vincent eventually returned to Paris, he was fortunate to meet a priest, Father Pierre de Berulle, who offered him spiritual counsel and guidance. Young Father Vincent worked as a tutor, a dispenser of alms, a short time as a pastor of a parish in Clichy, and then on to a position as chaplain and tutor to the de Gondi family in Paris. Having finally made a place for himself with a very influential family, Vincent could not have predicted how his life would change. On January 25th, 1617, on the feast of the conversion of St. Paul, in a small church in Fauville, Vincent preached a sermon on general confession. And he encouraged people to make a good confession. And the response was beyond what he could ever have imagined. The people so longed to hear the gospel preached to them as Vincent was inspired to do. And it was in these poor people that Vincent began to see the hidden face of God. He began to believe that God was leading him into a very profound part of his priestly ministry. And if he were to make it as a priest, divine providence, relying totally on God, would have to take first place in his life. Rely on God. What more would he need to do? And God truly did lead Vincent into being one of the greatest servants of the poor. Vincent went out and looked to serve the poorest of the poor, rural peasants, galley slaves who were prisoners serving their time as rowers of the French warships, orphans, the sick, the dying, people with mental illness were among those who Vincent reached out to. But he realized one man can't do it alone. Not even this ambitious and spiritually charged priest. So Vincent began to invite others to join him into ministry. He even dared to value the contributions of women, and the women responded, both country girls and great ladies of nobility. He first formed the Confraternity of Charity. This was generous women who took on some of the care of the sick and poor parishioners. It caught on, and confraternities started spreading throughout France. They later became known as the Ladies of Charity. And maybe Vincent realized, if you want to get the job done, get the women involved. There was one woman who stood out, and that was St. Louise de Marillac. It was with her that they began the Daughters of Charity. These sisters worked in hospitals, they cared for orphans and the homeless, and they let their streets be their cloister, always out searching to serve the poor. In 1625, Vincent formally founded the Congregation of the Mission. He gathered a small group of priests to be missionaries who would bring the good news of the Gospels to the poor. More and more were drawn into this work, and within a short time, they were preaching missions throughout the world. Father Vincent's ministry wouldn't end with the materially poor either. He was very aware of those who were spiritually poor, who needed guidance, who needed counsel, and among them, many of the clergy in France. And so Vincent developed a plan of spiritual conferences and retreats that would bring about a great reform among the clergy in France. This vision to serve the poor spread like fire. And Vincent once said, "If we are really called to carry the love of God far and wide, if we are to inflame the nations with this fire, if we have the vocation of setting the world on fire, if it is so, I say then, how much I must myself burn with the divine fire." That was the fuel for this amazing saint, the divine love of God. And that's all that Vincent wanted to let the world to know. To love God, the unconditional love of God, that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, and the tremendous love that God had for the poor. Who would ever imagine that caring for the poor could change a person's life like it did for St. Vincent de Paul? But wasn't that the mission of Jesus as well? To bring the good news to the poor, to free the captives, to feed the hungry, to comfort those in sorrow and grief, to care for the sick. Jesus who said, "When you do this to the least of mine, you do it to me." St. Vincent de Paul died on September 27th in 1680 and was canonized a saint by Pope Clement in 1737. Today, the charism and mission of St. Vincent de Paul reaches around the world. The Congregation of the Mission, the Vincentian Fathers and Brothers, the Daughters of Charity, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, the Ladies of Charity, the Marian Youth Movement, congregations started by other Vincentians or Daughters of Charity, like the Trinitarians, the Sisters of Charity, and you, the Association of the Miraculous Medal, all part of the family of St. Vincent de Paul. So these are the things that were important to Vincent. God's love for us, and for us to bring that love to others. Divine providence, always depend on God. 5 virtues he aspired to: simplicity, humility, meekness, mortification, and the zeal for salvation of souls. Vincent was about preaching the gospel. It's the good news for us to hear. He was about caring for the poor and meeting Christ in the poor, seeing the face of Christ in those that he served. He believed in prayer and reflection, that if we didn't have a solid, holy inner life, then we didn't really have life. And he believed in collaboration in ministry. Now, these are not just Vincent's values. They're gospel values. And you and I are called to these same values. We can never forget the least of our brothers and sisters, because Jesus said, "The poor you will have with you always." To think, caring for the poor was really St. Vincent's salvation. Maybe it's ours as well. God bless you.